All right, so we now have our first test in place and can actually start implementing the logic and test them. So one of the first things I want to do is add a PHPUnit XML file. The reason for this is that right now, when we want to test our package, we have to explicitly point PHPUnit to a test case that we have. And if we have multiple test cases, we would have to run PHPUnit multiple times for all of those files that we want to test. And we can simplify this by creating a phpunit.xml.dist file. So let's do this right now. Let's just create a new file called phpunit.xml.dist. Don't get confused. You can also create just the phpunit.xml file. The idea behind this .dist extension for PHPUnit is that you can have the dist file added to your source control and check it in with GitHub, for example. And then you can have user-specific phpunit.xml files, which will be ignored from source control so that users can overwrite the default file. So this is just a fallback. If no phpunit.xml file exists, PHPUnit will use the file called .dist. All right, so the content of this, to be honest, I mostly copy this from existing projects that I have. You can check out the complete PHPUnit documentation for all the available configuration settings. But mostly I just use the same setting and I'll show you what it does right now. So for example, if we go to the WebSockets package, we can see the phpunit.xml.dist. And we just go to raw and copy the content and paste it in here. All right, so we have a bootstrap configuration. This means that whenever our tests are running, we load this vendor autoload.php file. And this is handy because this ensures that we have the composer autoloading included in all of our tests. Then we don't want to back up global variables. We don't do anything with global variables here. We don't want to do anything with static attributes. We want colors in the output of our PHPUnit test cases. We want it to be verbose. This is just a different way when PHPUnit runs and it, for example, occurs an error, then we can see more information about why the error occurred. Then we want to convert errors, notices, and warnings to exceptions because we do not want these things to happen in our package. Process isolation is a feature of PHPUnit where one specific test runs in a separate process than the other tests. You could enable this by default so that every test runs in a separate process. For most of the tests, this is not required, and it only slows down the complete test suite, so just disable it. And we don't want to stop on the first failing tests, so we want all of the tests to be ran whenever one of them fails. Okay, then we define our test suites. So right now we only have one test suite. Let's just call it Chuck Norris test suite. And we tell PHPUnit that all of our test cases are in the tests directory. Then we have a filter, which is for code coverage. We'll talk about that later, but it just means that every file with the PHP extension inside of the source directory should be included for code coverage detection. Then we have different kind of logging for code coverage. We can just leave it in here. And then this one is specific to the WebSocket package. We can remove it right now. Okay, so with our new configuration in place, we can now, instead of calling this followed by the class name, just call PHPUnit. And now we see that this now ran, we have colors, and it's the same thing. But now if we would add another test class in here and we run the same command again, then both of those classes would be tested. Okay. So now with our configuration in place and our first test in place, let's try implementing what we actually want to do.